Hey guys. Tonight we are going to travel to a place that has become a metaphor for the middle of nowhere, but was actually the center of everything. We are going to the edge of the Sahara Desert, to the legendary city of Timbuktu. But we aren't going there to be the fabulously wealthy Mansa Musa, throwing gold nuggets at strangers until we crash the global economy. No, tonight. You are going to be someone far more important and far more stressed out. You are a librarian. You are the guardian of knowledge in a city made entirely of mud, surrounded by an ocean of sand that wants to bury you alive. Your job is to protect fragile paper from heat, termites, and thieves, in a world where a single book costs more than a horse. So, just a heads up, you probably won't die of a sword wound, but the dust in your lungs might be a problem. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment below and let me know, what city are you in right now? And what time is it there? And if you own more books than you have actually read, leave a scroll emoji in the comments so I know I'm not alone. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes. The room is dark, but you know it's morning.
How?
Because of the taste in your mouth. It's gritty. It tastes like ancient rock ground down into a fine powder. You run your tongue over your teeth, and it feels like you've been chewing on a piece of sandpaper. Welcome to Timbuktu. More specifically, welcome to the season of the harmattan. You sit up on your mat, the air in the room is cool, surprisingly cool. This is the genius of the architecture here. Your house isn't built of wood or stone. It is built of bankoa, mixture of clay, water, straw, and shea butter. The walls are thick, nearly 2 feet of solid earth. During the day, they absorb the brutal Saharan sun like a sponge, keeping the interior livable. At night, they slowly release that heat, keeping you from freezing. It is a natural air conditioning system that predates electricity by centuries. But the walls can't stop the dust. You stand up and shake out your blanket. A red cloud puffs up into the air, dancing in the single shaft of light coming through the small, high window. The dust is everywhere. It's on your water jug. It's on your sandals. It's in your eyebrows. You are literally inhaling the geography of Mali. You reach for a small twig on your bedside table. This is your toothbrush. It is a Salvadora persica stick, or mist. You chew on the end until it frays into bristles. And then you scrub your teeth. It tastes bitter, medicinal, and slightly gingery. It's not minty fresh, but it kills bacteria better than most modern pastes. As you scrub, you listen to the city waking up. It's quiet. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of insulation. The sand dampens sound. You don't hear carts clattering on cobblestones because there are no cobblestones, only sand. You hear the soft thud of donkeys' hooves, the rustle of robes, and the distant bleating of a goat that is probably eating someone's laundry. Then, the sound comes. The Adhan, the call to prayer. It starts from the Great Mosque, the Jingerbur, and then echoes from the Sankar, and then the Sidi Yo. The voices weave together, floating over the flat roofs of the city. It is the clock of your life. Time here isn't measured in minutes or hours. It's measured in prayers. Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. You are currently at Fajr, the dawn prayer. You wrap your head in a tagalmusta long strip of indigo-dyed cotton. You wrap it tight, covering your nose and mouth, leaving only your eyes exposed. This isn't a fashion statement, it is survival gear. The indigo dye is often pounded into the cloth so heavily that it stains your skin blue, which is why the Tuareg nomads are often called the blue men of the desert. You aren't a nomad, you are a city dweller. A scholar, but the desert doesn't care about your job title. The wind will strip the moisture from your face in minutes if you don't cover up. You step out of your house and into the street. The light is blinding. The sun is just rising, turning the sand dunes outside the city walls into mountains of gold. The sky is a pale, washed-out blue, bleached by the heat. You are walking through a maze. The streets of Timbuktu are narrow, winding, and confusing by design. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The layout of these desert cities was intentional. Narrow, winding streets provide shade for most of the day and break the force of the wind. If the streets were wide and straight, they would become wind tunnels, blasting sand into every doorway. By curving the streets, the city creates its own microclimate. As you walk, you pass a group of merchants arguing over a camel. They are speaking Thai, but you also hear snippets of Arabic, Tamashek, and Fulani. Timbuktu is the Manhattan of the 15th century Sahara. It is the meeting point of the camel and the canoe where the goods from the Mediterranean, brought by camel caravans across the desert, meet the gold and ivory from the south, brought by canoe up the Niger River. But there is a niche little historical nugget here, a controversy about the name of the city itself. Why is it called Timbuktu? Local legend says the city was founded as a seasonal camp by Tuareg nomads. They left their heavy goods in the care of an old woman named Buktu. In the local language, Tin means place or well. So Timbuktu literally means the place of Buktu. But here is where the scholars are still debating part comes in. Some historians argue that Buktu actually refers to a physical characteristic. One translation suggests it means the woman with the large navel. So, for centuries, the greatest center of Islamic learning in Africa might have been named the place of the big belly button. Other etymologists argue it simply means the hollow or the dune. Regardless of whether you live in Naval City or Dune City, you have a destination to reach. You aren't heading to the market to buy gold or salt. You are heading to the northeast quarter of the city. You see a structure rising above the low mud houses. It looks like a pyramid, but softer, organic, studded with wooden stakes that stick out like porcupine quills. This is the Sankar Mosque. But to you, it is simply the office. It is the university, the library, and the spiritual heart of the intellectual world. And inside those mud walls are the true treasures of Timbuktu. Not gold, not ivory, but words. You quicken your pace. You have keys to turn. And more importantly, you have to check on the humidity levels in the storeroom before the sun gets too high. You are standing in the shadow of the Sankar Mosque. From a distance, it looked like a sandcastle built by a giant with a very steady hand. But up close, it feels alive. The walls aren't flat, cold stone like the cathedrals of Europe. They are textured, warm, and organic. They bear the handprints of the masons who smoothed the mud plaster. You crane your neck to look up at the minaret. That's not a slender, soaring needle like the ones you'd see in Cairo or Istanbul. It's a sturdy, pyramidal tower that tapers toward the sky, looking like it grew out of the earth rather than being built upon it. This brings us to the most distinct feature of Timbuktu's architecture, the porcupine look. The entire face of the building is studded with bundles of wooden sticks jutting out about 2 feet from the wall. They cast long, spiky shadows in the morning sun. To an outsider, they might look like gargoyles, or perhaps some kind of defensive fortification to stop ninjas from climbing the walls. But you know the truth. These sticks are called torin. They are made from the borassus palm, which is termite resistant, a crucial quality, as we will discuss later. And they serve a brilliant, practical purpose. This leads to a niche. Fascinating cultural fact: the built-in scaffolding. In a climate like this, with intense sun and whipping sandstorms, the mud plaster banco cracks and erodes. If you leave it alone, the mosque literally melts. So, every year after the harvest, the entire city gathers for the crepusage, the plastering festival. The torin are permanent scaffolding. The masons don't need to build ladders. They just climb the building using these sticks like a staircase. They mix fresh mud, climb up the porcupine quills, and slap a new layer of skin onto the mosque. It turns maintenance into a spectator sport and a community party. If European cathedrals had permanent ladders attached to them, maybe they wouldn't take 300 years to renovate. You step through the heavy wooden doors. The transition is instantaneous. One moment, you are baking in the Saharan sun, your skin prickling with heat. The next, you are enveloped in cool, dim silence. The temperature drops by maybe 15 or 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It feels like stepping into a cave. This is the genius of Sudano-Sahelian architecture. The walls are massive, sometimes 2 or 3 feet thick at the base. They have high thermal inertia. They absorb the heat all day long, keeping the inside cool. By the time the heat penetrates to the interior, it's night. and the walls radiate that warmth to keep the sleepers comfortable. It is a building that breathes with the day. You take off your sandals, you don't step onto marble or carpet, you step onto sand. The floor of the Sankar Mosque is covered in clean, fine sand. It is soft under your feet. It's humble. It reminds every scholar who enters here, from the wealthiest merchant to the poorest student, that they are made of dust and will return to dust. Plus, it's very easy to clean. When the sand gets dirty, you just sweep it out and bring in fresh sand from the endless supply outside. You walk deeper into the hall. It is a forest of thick pillars. The light filters in through small openings, creating shafts of illumination that catch the dust motes dancing in the air. But Sankar isn't just a place to pray, it is the University of Sankar. In your time, this is one of the premier intellectual centers of the Islamic world. We are talking about 25,000 students in a city of 100,000 people. That means 1 in 4 people you bump into as a student. However, don't picture a modern campus. There are no lecture halls with tiered seating. There is no central administration office where you pay tuition. This brings us to a massive academic controversy: the university label. Historians and educational theorists have argued for decades, was Sankar a university in the way we understand it, like Oxford or Al-Azhar? Camp A argues yes. It had a curriculum, Quran, logic, astronomy, law, it had a chancellor, the Imam of Sankar, and it had degrees. Camp B argues no. They say it was a loose confederation of independent colleges. There was no central Sankar University issuing diplomas. Instead, it was based on the Ijaza system. An Ijaza is a certification given by a specific master to a specific student. You didn't get a degree from Sankar. You got a permission slip from Professor Ahmed saying, "This guy knows my book and is allowed to teach it." So, Sankar wasn't a monolith. It was a neighborhood of hundreds of independent microschools centered around the mosque. It was the Silicon Valley of medieval theology, a decentralized hub of startups. You walk past a circle of students sitting on mats. This is a halakha, a learning circle. In the center sits a sheikh, an old man with a white beard. Leaning against a pillar, he is reciting a text on Maliki law from memory. The students are furiously writing on wooden boards, aloe with reed pens. They look up as you pass. You nod. You are a figure of respect here. Why? Because you hold the keys to the hard drive. The sheikh might know the text by heart, but if he wants to check a reference, or if a student wants to copy a rare commentary from Baghdad, they have to come to you. You head toward a heavy cedar door at the back of the prayer hall. This leads to the library annex. It's not the only library in the city. In fact, most of the books in Timbuktu aren't in public buildings. They are in private homes. Every wealthy family has a private library. Books are status symbols. A merchant might not be able to read, but he will spend a fortune to buy a library so he can brag about it at dinner parties. It's the medieval equivalent of having a wine cellar you never drink from. But your library is different. It is the working collection for the scholars of the mosque. You unlock the door. The smell hits you. It's the smell of old paper, leather, dried ink, and sharp herbs. It is the smell of history decomposing and being preserved at the same time. You step inside. The room is lined with wooden shelves, packed with leather-bound volumes. Some are stacked vertically. Others are lying flat in leather cases. You walk to your desk. On it sits a pile of new arrivals manuscripts brought in by the last caravan from Fez. You pick one up. The cover is tooled leather, intricate and beautiful. But you aren't looking at the cover. You open it and feel the page. It is smooth, it is crisp, that has a slight sheen to it. Italian, you whisper. You are holding a sheet of paper that was made in Venice, shipped to North Africa, carried by camel across the Sahara, and ended up in a mud mosque in Mali. This paper is worth more than the gold dust the merchants are trading in the market. And tonight, you are going to find out why. You are holding a sheet of paper that has traveled further than most humans ever will. You run your thumb over the corner. It makes a crisp, sharp, snapping sound, the rattle of high-quality paper to the untrained eye. Paper is just ... stuff you write on. But to you, a Timbuktu librarian in the 15th or 16th century, paper is a strategic resource. It is the microchip of your era. This brings us to a mainstream historical reality. The Timbuktu paper deficit. Timbuktu has everything. It has gold so much that it devalues currencies. It has salt, it has ivory. But it lacks one critical thing: paper mills. Unlike China, Baghdad, or Fez, Timbuktu does not produce its own paper. The technology requires immense amounts of running water to pulp the rags. And while you have the Niger River nearby, the industry never took root here. This means every single sheet of paper in your library had to be imported. Imagine the logistics. A ream of paper is made in a water-powered mill in Venice or Fabriano, Italy. It is shipped across the Mediterranean to Tripoli or Morocco. There, it is loaded onto a camel. That camel then walks for 50 to 60 days across the Sahara Desert, the harshest landscape on earth. If the camel dies, no paper. If the caravan gets raided by bandits, no paper. If a sandstorm ruins the cargo, no paper. By the time a blank sheet of paper reaches your desk, its value has skyrocketed by 400% or 500%. This leads to a famous historical quote or a paraphrase of Leo Africanus. In Timbuktu, books sell for more than any other merchandise. It wasn't just intellectual appreciation, it was raw supply chain economics. You were paying for the camel's mileage. You hold the page up to the light coming from the doorway. You are looking for something specific, a watermark. There, faint but visible in the fiber of the paper, is the outline of a crown. Or perhaps a crescent moon, or 3 circles. This is the brand logo of the Italian paper mill. This leads to a niche, fascinating detail: the Tre Lune 3 Moons brand. For centuries, Italian papermakers created specific watermarks for the export market to the Islamic world. The 3 Moons watermark was incredibly popular in the Ottoman Empire and West Africa. It became a symbol of quality. It's ironic, isn't it? The texts you are preserving, the Holy Quran, the Hadith, the legal rulings of Islam, are being written on paper manufactured by Christians in Italy who likely have no idea their product is preserving the heritage of Timbuktu. It is a silent, global collaboration of commerce. But paper wasn't the only option. You look at a different manuscript on the shelf. This one is thicker, yellower, and feels slightly fuzzy. Parchment gazelle or goat skin. Before the Italian paper flooded the market, Timbuktu scholars used parchment. Gazelle skin is the romantic term often used in legends. But let's be real, catching gazelles is hard. Most of the time, it was sheep or goat skin. Processing skin into parchment is a smelly, brutal business involving soaking skins in urine and lime, scraping off the hair, and stretching them on frames. While parchment is durable, it lasts for 1,000 years. It is heavy and bulky. A 500-page book made of skin would weigh as much as a small child. Paper was the iPad Air upgrade, light, thin, and portable. This brings us to an academic controversy: the local production theory. Most historians agree Timbuktu imported its paper. However, a small camp of researchers argues that there must have been some small-scale local paper production using crude methods, perhaps reprocessing old rags or using local plant fibers like baobab bark. Simply because the demand was so high. They point to some rougher, coarser manuscripts that don't match the Italian or North African quality. But the majority view is, no. The roughness is just low-quality import, the bargain bin paper that the cheaper merchants sold. You place the Italian manuscript down carefully. You don't want to crease it. The margins are wide. This is intentional. In Timbuktu, a book is never finished. You open a text on Islamic law. The center block of text is the original author's words, but the margins, they are a chaotic, beautiful mess of commentary. Scholars would write notes in the margins. Then, other scholars would write notes on those notes. Then, students would scribble questions. The margins are a centuries-long chat room where people argue with each other across time. This argument is weak. A scribe from 1550 might write in red ink, "You are the weak one." A scribe from 1620 might reply in black ink right next to it. But to join this conversation, you need ink. You look at your inkwell. It's dry. You sigh. You can't just go to Office Depot. You have to make the ink. And in Timbuktu, making ink is not just chemistry, it's cooking. You stand up and head to the small courtyard behind the library. You need to fire up the brazier, you need to burn some stuff, and you need to add the secret ingredient that keeps the words from fading under the relentless African sun. You are sitting on a low wooden stool in the courtyard behind the library. Your hands look like you have just lost a fist fight with a chimney sweep. They are stained a deep, indelible black. Your fingernails are in mourning. You are making ink. In Timbuktu. You can buy paper if you are rich, but you make your own ink. A scholar who buys pre-made ink is looked upon with the same suspicion as a chef who uses jarred pasta sauce. It suggests you don't care about your craft. You are holding a mortar and pestle. Inside is a mixture that looks like sludge but smells ... Interesting. It smells of smoke, earth, and something sharp, like vinegar. This brings us to the black alchemy of the desert. The base of your ink, the soul of it is carbon. But where do you get carbon in a city made of mud? You burn things. The cheap way is to scrape the soot off the bottom of the cooking pots in the kitchen. This is soup ink. It's gritty and smells like last night's goat stew. But you are a professional. You use calcined lambs, wool, or burnt seeds from the desert date balanitis. Egyptique aid. You burn them in a special kiln until they turn into a fine oily charcoal. Then, you need the glue. If you just mix charcoal with water, it will dry and blow away like dust. You need a binder to lock it onto the paper. You reach for a jar of amber-colored crystals. Gum arabic. This is the sap of the acacia tree, Acacia senegal, which grows in the Sahel, the transition zone between the desert and the savanna, right where Timbuktu sits. This leads to a mainstream historical fact: the gum arabic monopoly. For centuries, this region controlled the world's supply of gum arabic. It wasn't just for ink, it was used in medicine, food, and later, in European textile printing. In the 9th century, this sap was almost as valuable as the gold. You dissolve the crystals in water until they form a sticky, golden syrup. You pour the gum syrup into the charcoal dust. You start grinding, scrape, grind, scrape, grind. You have to do this for hours. If the particles aren't microscopic, the ink will clog your pen. It's a meditative process, or a boring one, depending on your mood. But now comes the secret ingredient. You reach for a small vial. This is the proprietary blend of the Sankar library. Every family of scribes has a secret recipe passed down from father to son. Why? Because of the insects. Timbuktu is hot. Bugs love it here. Termites, silverfish, and bookworms look at a manuscript and see an all-you-can-eat buffet. So, you weaponize the ink. You add a splash of vinegar to fix the color and a pinch of something toxic. Maybe it's crushed gallnuts, which contain tannic acid. Maybe it's a specific bitter herb from the desert. The goal is to make the words taste terrible. You want the termite to take one bite of the letter Aleph and spit it out. You are literally poisoning knowledge to save it. This leads to a niche. Fascinating detail. The barrier stone. To make the ink shine, to give it that glossy, professional finish. You don't use chemicals, you use a stone. After the ink dries on the page, it looks matte and dull. The scribe takes a smooth, polished agate or a specific river stone called a barrier and rubs the letters. This friction burnishes the gum arabic, making the letters glitter as if they were wet. It protects the ink and makes the manuscript look like it glows. But ink isn't just black. You look at the smaller pots next to you. Red ink, rubrication. You use this for vowels, for the name of Allah, and for the first word of a new chapter. It is made from laterite, red earth dust, or crushed bugs cochineal, though that's an import, or cinnabar. Gold ink. This is for the sultan, or the incredibly wealthy merchants. You take real gold. Timbuktu has plenty of that tanned. Mix it with the gum. But writing with gold is a nightmare. It's heavy. It sinks to the bottom of the inkwell. You have to keep stirring it every few seconds. This brings us to an academic controversy: the local versus import design debate. When you look at the beautiful geometric designs in Timbuktu manuscripts, the intricate borders, the gold leaf circles, where did that style come from? Camp A, the diffusionists, argues it's purely Maghrebi. They say the style was copied directly from Moroccan and Andalusian Spanish Muslim. Manuscripts. They view Timbuktu art as a provincial branch of North African art. Camp B, the indigenous school, argues that while the script is Arabic, the geometry is African. They point to the patterns used in local mud cloth, bogle and feen, pottery, and jewelry. They argue that Timbuktu scribes infused local mathematical patterns and color palettes into the Islamic framework, creating a unique Sudanic style of illumination. Basically, are you copying Fez, or are you remixing Fez with the Sahel? You finish grinding. The ink is smooth, thick, and jet black. You test it. You pull out your Callum the Reed pen. This is another tool you have to make yourself. You take a stalk of river reed phragmites, dry it, and cut the nib with a razor-sharp knife. The angle of the cut determines your font. If you cut it flat, you get a thick, blocky script. If you cut it at an angle, you get the flowing cursive style. You dip the Callum into the pot, the reed sucks up the ink. You draw a line on a scrap of paper, it flows perfectly. Black as a moonless night, no clumps. Perfect, you whisper. But as you cap the inkwell, you hear a sound. A faint, rhythmic scratching coming from inside the library. It's not a pen, it's a chewing sound. You freeze. The ink is ready. But you might be too late. The enemy is already inside the gates. You grab a candle and your inspection stick. It's time to go to war against the most dangerous creature in the desert. No, not a lion. A white ant. You freeze in the doorway of the storage room. The candle in your hand flickers, casting long, nervous shadows against the mud walls. You hold your breath. You are listening for the sound of eating. That is a faint, rhythmic click, scrape. To anyone else, it might sound like the wind or settling dust. To you, it sounds like the burning of the Library of Alexandria. You step forward, eyes scanning the wooden chests stacked in the corner. You spot it. A thin brown line running up the wall, looking like a vein of dried mud, termite tunnel. You curse under your breath, a very unscholarly word involving camels and their mothers. You rush over and smash the mud tunnel with your sandal. Tiny, pale, translucent insects spill out, blindly scrambling for cover. Welcome to the termite war. In Timbuktu, you don't fear fire as much as you fear the termies. These white ants are the apex predators of history. They eat cellulose, your entire library of the paper, the wooden covers, the shelves, the roof beams is made of cellulose. To a termite, you are living inside a giant gingerbread house. This brings us to a mainstream historical reality. The fragility of African history. One of the reasons European history is so heavy is because they wrote on parchment skin and carved in stone. Those things don't taste good. But in West Africa, the reliance on paper and organic materials meant that knowledge was biodegradable. Historians estimate that for every manuscript we have found in Timbuktu today, about 300,000 to 400,000, there might be millions that were simply eaten. The dark ages of African history aren't dark because nothing was written. They are dark because the evidence was lunch. You grab the chest nearest to the tunnel. You pray to Allah that they haven't breached the seal. You open the leather lid, bought heartbreak. The top manuscript, a treatise on astronomy, has a hole drilled straight through the center. It looks like someone shot it with a small caliber pistol. The termites have eaten a tunnel from the front cover to the back, devouring the star charts, the calculations, and the author's name. This is called a bookworm gallery, though termites are worse than worms. You lift the damaged book gently. Flakes of paper drift down like snow. This leads to a niched tragic preservation technique. The sun-baked Shemsi. How do you kill the bugs without destroying the book? You can't use bug spray, it doesn't exist. And the liquid would ruin the ink. You can't freeze them, no freezers. So, you use the Sahara. You take the infested manuscripts out to the courtyard at noon. You lay them open under the brutal, direct sun. The heat of the sand can reach 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 65 degrees Celsius. This cooks the larvae and dehydrates the adults. They die or flee. But it's a dangerous game if you leave the paper in the sun for too long. The gum Arabic in the ink dries out and cracks, and the letters flake off the page. You have to stand there, sweating, turning the pages, baking the history just enough to save it, but not enough to kill it. You carry the stack of books outside. The sun is already punishing. You lay them out. While you wait for the bugs to roast, let's discuss an academic controversy: the family archive paradox. In Timbuktu, libraries are rarely public institutions like the New York Public Library. They are private family heirlooms. The Mama Hadara Library. The Fondo Kadi Library, these belong to specific clans. Camp A, the modernists, argues this was a disaster for preservation. Storing priceless texts in mud houses, under beds, or in damp chests, without climate control accelerated their decay. They argue the books should have been centralized in a stone vault centuries ago. Camp B, the traditionalists, argues that this family ownership is the only reason the books survived at all, because the books were personal property. They were loved. They were hidden during invasions, which we will get to later. If they had been in one central national library, a single invader or a single fire could have wiped out everything. The decentralized cloud storage of Timbuktu saved the data. You watch a termite crawl out of the spine of a law textbook and instantly sizzle. On the hot sand, you feel a grim sense of satisfaction. But inspecting for bugs isn't just about killing them, it's about smell. You pick up a leather case, you sniff it. Does it smell like mold? If yes, you have a bigger problem than bugs. You have rot. The Niger River floods every year. The humidity rises. If the books get damp, the paper turns into pulp blocks. You have to separate the pages. This is surgery. You use a thin ivory knife to peel wet pages apart. If you tear a word, you lose a sentence of God's law. The pressure is immense. You check the leather covers. Timbuktu bindings are unique. They are usually red or reddish-brown goat leather, decorated with geometric tooling lines and circles. They often have a flap, an envelope flap, that folds over the front to protect the edges of the paper from ... Well, from the sand, you rub sea butter or beeswax into the leather to keep it supple. If the leather cracks, the termites get in. You spend the next hour as a triage nurse. The astronomy book is a casualty. It can be read, but the North Star is missing. A book on grammar is fine, just dusty. A collection of poetry has silverfish damage. They graze on the surface of the paper, eating the glaze, leaving the text looking like a lace doily. You sigh. You wipe the sweat from your forehead. This war never ends. The termites never sleep. They don't take holidays. You are one man against an army of millions. But there is a solution for the books that are too far gone, the ones that are falling apart in your hands. You can't save the physical object. The paper is dead. But the words can be saved. You have to migrate the data. You have to copy it. You pack up the sun-baked books. You carry them back into the cool dimness of the library. You place the damaged astronomy book on your desk. You sharpen your reed pen. You crack your knuckles. You are about to engage in the most physically painful part of your job. You are going to become a human photocopier. You are sitting at your low wooden desk. The damaged astronomy book lies open to your left, held flat by a brass weight. To your right is a pristine, terrifyingly expensive sheet of Italian paper. In your hand is the reed pen you carved earlier. You take a deep breath. You dip the pen. You begin. Welcome to the agony of the scribe. In movies, writing with a quill looks romantic. The character dashes off a letter with a flourish and seals it with wax. In reality, copying a manuscript is a form of physical torture that rivals digging a ditch. You are not dashing anything off. You are engaging in high-stakes precision engineering where a single muscle twitch ruins a week's worth of wages. You are writing in a script known as Sudani, or a variation of Maghrebi. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: the font of West Africa. If you look at Arabic calligraphy from Baghdad or Istanbul, it is often light, flowing, and cursive like the Naskh or Thuluth scripts. It looks like wire dancing in the wind. But the script you are writing, it is heavy, it is thick, it is blocky. The Sudani script reflects the architecture of Timbuktu itself. The letters have thick uniform lines drawn with a blunt pen nib. The curves are generous and rounded, like the mud domes of the mosques. It is a earthy script. It is designed to be read easily in the dim light of a mud brick room. It shouts the words rather than whispering them. You write the first word, Bismillah, in the name of God. The ink flows black and glossy. The letters look like fortress walls on the white paper. But 5 minutes in, your body starts to rebel. This leads to a niche. Relatable historical reality. The scribes complaint the colophon. We know exactly how much scribes hated their jobs because they told us. At the very end of a manuscript, in the section called the colophon, scribes would often break the fourth wall. They would stop copying the holy text and leave a personal note. Instead of the end, they would write things like, "Completed by the humble servant of God while suffering from a terrible backache." Or, written in the season of freezing cold, "May God forgive the sloppiness caused by my shivering fingers." Or the classic, "My hand hurts, my back breaks." But the book remains. You shift your weight on the stool, your lower back is screaming. You don't have an ergonomic Herman Miller chair. You are hunched over, nose 6 inches from the page, trying to keep your hand perfectly steady while your spine slowly turns into a question mark. There is a saying among scribes, writing destroys the eyes, bends the back, and crushes the ribs. It is a full-body workout that involves zero movement. And God forbid you make a mistake. You are copying a complex chart of the zodiac. Your mind wanders for a split second. Maybe you're thinking about that roast peacock canned. You write Mars instead of Venus. Panic. You can't hit Ctrl-Z. You can't use WITE-out. If the ink is still wet. You use the most advanced eraser known to man. Your tongue. You quickly lick the mistake. The gum-based ink dissolves on your tongue, tasting bitter and metallic, and you wipe the paper clean with your thumb. If the ink has dried, you have to use a razor. You very, very gently scrape the surface of the paper to shave off the layer of ink. But if you scrape too deep, you thin the paper, and the ink from the other side will show through. It's microsurgery. You finish the page. You sprinkle fine sand pounce over the wet ink to dry it. You blow the sand off. The page is beautiful. It is a mirror of the original, saved from the termites. But as you dip your pen for the next page, you find yourself staring at the words. You aren't reading them anymore. You are just copying shapes. This brings us to a massive academic controversy, the oral versus written war. For a long time, Western historians claimed that Africa had no history because it was oral. They ignored Timbuktu. But now, there is a reverse debate. Did the arrival of the book weaken the griot? The griot or jelly is the traditional West African keeper of history. They are living libraries who memorize genealogies, wars, and treaties for centuries back. Their training is rigorous. Camp A argues that Timbuktu represents a triumph of literacy, a higher form of civilization, where law is codified and static. Camp B argues that the written word is actually less trustworthy than the griot. Why? Because a book can be burned. A book can be eaten by termites. A book can be forged by a liar in a room, but a griot, he performs in public. If he lies, the elders correct him. His history is peer-reviewed live. Some scholars argue that in Timbuktu, these two worlds didn't fight. They merged. Many scholars were griots who learned to write. They treated the book not as a replacement for memory, but as a backup drive. You look at the text you are copying. It's a book on logic translated from Greek to Arabic. Aristotle, here you are, an African scholar, sitting on the edge of the Sahara, saving the thoughts of a Greek philosopher using paper from Italy and ink, made from desert dates. You are the ultimate connector, but your stomach growls, and your hand is cramping into a claw. Enough, you whisper. You clean your pen. You close the inkwell. You need to stretch. You need to walk. And more importantly, you need to acquire something new. Copying is noble, but buying is exciting. You heard a rumor earlier. A caravan arrived from the north, from Morocco. A merchant named Abdul is staying near the market. He claims to have a book that you don't have. A book about the stars that supposedly corrects Ptolemy. But books are expensive. You don't have gold coins. You have something else. You walk to the corner of the room and pick up a heavy, wrapped slab. It's white. It's crystalline. It's heavy. Salt. In Timbuktu, you can eat gold, but you can't live without salt. And today, you are going to trade a block of the earth's sweat for a slice of the heavens. You are walking through the market of Timbuktu, hugging a slab of rock against your chest like it's a newborn baby. It weighs about 5 kilograms. It is white, jagged, and sweating slightly in the heat. This is an amalai, a slab of rock salt. To a modern observer, you look like a geologist. To a 15th century merchant, you look like a walking ATM. You are carrying the Visa Infinite card of the Sahara. You navigate through the crowded lanes of the Yobu Bear, the big market. The noise is overwhelming, donkeys braying, merchants shouting prices in Songhai, the clatter of calabash bowls. The air smells of roasting meat, dried fish, and the sharp tang of sweat. You aren't here for the dried fish. You are looking for a man named Abdul, a merchant from Fez who arrived with the caravan yesterday. Rumor has it he brought a crate of royal goods, not silk, not spices, but paper. You find him sitting under a shaded awning. Sipping tea, he looks exhausted. His face is weathered by the 50-day trek across the sand. He sees you approaching, sees the white slab in your arms, and his eyes light up. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the salt-gold exchange. You've heard the legend that in Timbuktu, salt was worth its weight in gold. That's a bit of an exaggeration. It was usually worth more in the south, in the forests where salt was scarce, but in Timbuktu, it was still a high-value currency. This salt comes from Taudini, a hellscape mine in the far north of the desert. There is no vegetation there, no fresh water. Just slaves digging salt from the ancient seabed and dying of heat stroke. The slab you are holding is crystallized suffering. That's why it's expensive. Salam alaikum, you say, setting the heavy slab down on his rug. Wa alaikum assalam. Abdul replies. He taps the salt with a small hammer. It rings solid, high quality. You are the librarian, the one looking for the stars. I am. Show me. Abdul reaches into a leather satchel and pulls out a book. It is wrapped in indigo cloth. He unfolds it gently. It is a copy of Al-Sufi's Book of Fixed Stars, or perhaps a commentary on it. You open it. The calligraphy is exquisite fine, flowing Maghribi script, not the blocky Sudani style you write in. The diagrams of the constellations are illustrated in gold leaf. Andromeda. Perseus. The Great Bear. It is from Granada. Abdul lies, it's probably from Marrakesh. But Granada sounds more expensive. Saved from the Christians. You touch the page, it's perfect. This book contains data your library is missing. It corrects the coordinates of the stars based on the precession of the equinoxes. The salt, you say, pushing the slab forward. Abdul laughs. For this is a masterpiece. I want gold. 5 mit. This leads to a niche economic reality. The dust currency. In Timbuktu, gold coins diners were rare. The currency of the street was gold dust. Merchants carried small scales and little bags of dust. You would pinch out a measure of gold to buy a sheep. It was a messy, precarious way to shop. One sneeze, and you're bankrupt. But you are a scholar. You don't have a bag of gold dust. You have your salary, which is often paid in goods grain, cloth, and salt. I have the salt, you say firmly, and I will write a poem in your honor. A poem that will be read in the court of the Askia. Abdul hesitates. He looks at the salt, he looks at the book. The salt is a guaranteed profit. He can take it south to Jen and flip it for gold or cola nuts. The book, the market for astronomy manuscripts, is small. It's basically just you and 3 other guys. The salt, he agrees. And the poem, but make it a long poem. You make the trade. You wrap the precious book in your own shawl. You leave the salt behind. You feel lighter, yet richer, but as you walk back to the Sanker district, clutching your prize, you start thinking about what is inside the book. This brings us to a massive academic controversy, the copycat vs. Innovator debate. For centuries, Western historians assumed that Timbuktu's astronomy was just copy-paste. They thought African scholars simply memorized Greek Ptolemy and Arab works without understanding the math or adding anything new. Camp A, the colonial view, said, they were just religious archivists. Camp B, the modern view, screams, look at the manuscripts. Recent studies of Timbuktu's astronomy texts reveal something incredible. The scholars didn't just copy, they recalculated. Timbuktu is at a different latitude than Baghdad or Athens. If you use Ptolemy's charts blindly, your prayer times will be wrong, and you will be facing the wrong way when you pray to Mecca Qibla. The manuscripts show complex trigonometry where local scholars corrected the Greek math to fit the West African horizon. They were observing the stars, noticing the drift, and updating the database. You aren't just holding a book. You are holding a tool that you will likely hack and improve with your own marginal notes. You stop in the street to look at a page again. There is a diagram of the retrograde motion of Mars. It's beautiful, but your reverie is broken by a shouting match. He stole my goat. Your goat ate my fence. You look up. Two men are dragging each other by the robes, heading straight for you. They aren't looking for a fight. They are looking for a judge. In Timbuktu, the line between librarian and lawyer does not exist. You are a fakia jurist. You possess the books of law. Therefore, you are the law. You sigh. You tuck your new astronomy book safely into your sash. You can't study the stars yet. First. You have to deal with the petty, earthy problems of your neighbors. Stop. You command, raising your hand. The men freeze. They see the ink stains on your fingers. They see the scholar's turban. They know that you have access to the Muqtasar of Khalil, the standard legal text. They drop their hands. The goat, you say, channeling the authority of the library. Bring it to the courtyard. And bring tea. We will settle this. According to the Maliki school, you turn back toward your office. The stars will have to wait. Now, you have to preside over the trial of the hungry goat. You settle the goat dispute quickly. It turns out the goat did eat the fence. But the fence was encroaching on the public path. You cite a minor precedent about rights of way from a dusty scroll. Order the goat owner to pay 3 melons in damages and send them on their way. But you barely have time to wipe the sweat from your forehead before the real case arrives. A woman steps into the courtyard. She is not shouting like the goat men. She is silent, dignified, and determined. She is followed by a man who looks furious, but is trying to hide it because he is terrified of you. This is a divorce case. In Timbuktu, you aren't just a librarian. You are a fakia jurist. The books behind you aren't just literature. They are the Constitution. When a marriage fails, the couple doesn't go to a secular court. They come to the man with the books. The woman, let's call her Fatimata, speaks first. She wants a cold divorce. This is a specific type of separation in Islamic law where the wife initiates the divorce, usually in exchange for returning her dowry mahr. He refuses to release me, she says, her voice steady. I have offered to return the gold anklets, but he wants the cows to dot the cows that my father gave me, not him. You look at the husband. Is this true? He crosses his arms. The cows fed her while she lived under my roof. They are payment for her maintenance. You sigh. You stand up and walk back into the cool darkness of the library. You don't need to guess, you need to look it up. You head straight for the shelf containing the Muqtasar of Khalil. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: the law of the land. For centuries, this specific book, the Muqtasar, by the Egyptian scholar Khalil ibn Ishaq, was the supreme legal authority in West Africa. It is a dense, summarized code of Maliki law. In Timbuktu, if it's in the Muqtasar, it's law. If it's not, it's just an opinion. Scholars memorized this book. Entire commentaries were written just to explain its grammar. It was the civil code of the Mali and Songhai empires. You find the chapter on KLL. You scan the margins where previous scholars, perhaps your own father, have written notes on local customs. You return to the courtyard with the heavy book open in your hands. The visual impact of the book is powerful. The husband shrinks a little. He knows he can't argue with the paper. The law is clear, you announce, reading the Arabic text and translating it into Songhai. The cow requires the return of the mahr dowry. The anklets must be returned. But the cows, you pause for dramatic effect. The cows are her personal property, Tamlik. They are not part of the dowry that you cannot claim them for. Maintenance. A husband is obligated to feed his wife without charging her for it. The husband opens his mouth to protest, but you tap the page with your index finger. Do you wish to argue with Sheikh Khalil? You ask softly. He looks at the book. He looks at you. He shakes his head. No, Sheikh. The divorce is granted. Fatimata keeps her cows. This leads to a fascinating academic controversy, the Timbuktu feminist debate. Western historians often stereotype Islamic societies as monolithic patriarchies where women had zero rights. But scholars studying the Timbuktu manuscripts have found a surprising amount of legal agency for women. Camp A, the traditional view, argues that women were still second-class citizens, dependent on male guardians. Camp B, the manuscript evidence, argues that Timbuktu's women were economic powerhouses. The legal contracts show women owning property, running businesses, buying and selling slaves, and initiating divorce. They point to the fact that women funded many of the libraries and mosques. The law courts, while run by men, often upheld women's property rights, strictly against greedy husbands. So, were you an early feminist ally? Or just a bureaucrat following the rules? Probably a bit of both. The law protected property, and if a woman owned it, the law defended her. The couple leaves Fotomata walking tall, the ex-husband sulking. You close the heavy book. You feel the weight of it. This is the true power of the library. It's not about hoarding ancient trivia, it's about order, in a city surrounded by a lawless desert. These fragile pages are the only thing stopping society from descending into might makes right. You just used a 200-year-old text from Egypt to save a woman's livelihood in Mali. But all this, judging, is exhausting work. Your throat is dry. The adrenaline of the confrontation is fading, leaving you tired. It is mid-afternoon. The sun is blazing. The heat is at its peak. It is time for the most important ritual of the day. It is time to put the books down and pick up the teapot. You signal to your assistant. Boil the water, you say, and bring the mint. Lots of it. You are about to engage in the 3-tea ceremony, the social lubricant of the Sahara. And you are expecting guests. Other scholars are coming over to gossip, argue, and perhaps critique your new astronomy book. The sun has reached that punishing angle in the sky where even the mud walls seem to radiate heat. The streets of Timbuktu are empty. The donkeys are asleep. The market is silent. It is the time of the Kailula, the midday siesta. But you are not sleeping. You are preparing for the most critical social ritual of the day. You sit on a woven mat in the shaded corner of the courtyard. Your assistant brings out a small charcoal brazier, a battered metal teapot, and a tray of tiny fragile glasses. It is time for the 3 teas now. A quick historical reality check. While tea, specifically green gunpowder tea from China, became the lifeblood of the Sahel in later centuries, in your time, it is an ultra-luxury import brought down from Morocco. Drinking it is a flex. It says, I have connections in Fez. You watch the water boil. You throw in the tea leaves. But the magic ingredient is sugar. Sugar comes in hard, conical loaves, sugar cones, that you have to smash with a hammer. It is expensive. You throw a generous chunk into the pot. You lift the teapot high above the glasses, maybe 2 or 3 feet in the air. You pour a long, thin stream, splosh. The goal is not just to fill the glass, but to create a thick head of foam. This foam is called the turban. If you serve a glass without foam, it is an insult. It implies the tea is stale, or you are lazy. A glass with a high frothy turban is a sign of respect. You pour the first round. The first cup is bitter as death. It is strong. It is dark. It is pure caffeine. You drink it in a slurping sip, pulling air through the liquid to cool it. It hits your brain like a hammer, waking you up from the afternoon slump. Just as you finish the first cup, your guests arrive. They are fellow scholars from the Sankor district. There is Ahmed, a grammarian who is obsessed with syntax, and Ousmane, a historian who thinks he knows everything about the Songhai royal family. They kick off their sandals and sit down. They don't say hello. The heat today is a punishment from God. You nod and hand them the tea. This brings us to a niche, stimulant-fueled fact, the kola nut. Goro. While you sip the tea, you also pass around a small basket of reddish-purple nuts. These are kola nuts, Kola acuminata. They grow in the rainforests to the south, modern-day Ghana, Nigeria, and are traded up the river. You take one, you crack it open. You chew it. It tastes incredibly bitter at first, but then it leaves a sweet aftertaste and numb gums. It is packed with caffeine and theobromine. For a Timbuktu scholar, the kola nut is the cigarette, the coffee, and the chewing gum all rolled into one. It suppresses hunger and keeps you awake for those all-night reading sessions. A scholar with orange, stained teeth is a scholar who is working hard. The conversation begins. And let me tell you, the faculty lounge of Timbuktu is vicious. Mainstream history paints Timbuktu as a utopia of wisdom, where everyone held hands and read books. The reality, it was a snake pit of academic rivalry. Ahmed takes a sip of tea and immediately launches an attack. Have you seen the new commentary by Sheikh Mahmud? He sneers. His handwriting is atrocious. He writes his ra like a zay, and his grammar. He uses the passive voice like a peasant. Ousmane laughs. Mahmud, that man thinks the world is flat. I heard he tried to argue with a Portuguese trader that the ocean has an edge. You sip your tea and smile. You love this. This is the chain of contempt. In Timbuktu, your status depends on your sanad, your chain of transmission. Who taught you? Who taught your teacher? If you learned from a prestigious lineage, you are golden. If you learned from a nobody, your books are worthless. You are currently judging a rival scholar not by his ideas, but by his bad penmanship and his low-tier teachers. It is petty, it is elitist, and it is entirely human. You pour the second round. The second cup is soft as life. You add more sugar. You add a handful of fresh mint leaves. The tea is sweeter now. Herbier, the conversation softens. You discuss the Askia, the emperor. The Askia is losing his sight, Ousmane whispers, leaning in. His sons are restless. I heard the musketeers from Morocco are moving south. This is dangerous talk. Political instability is bad for libraries. When empires fall, cities burn. We should bury the books, you say quietly. The table goes silent. This leads to a massive academic controversy. The black versus Arab identity. As you sit there, a mix of Songhai, Tuareg, and Fulani scholars. How do you see yourselves? Kampa, the Arabization theory, argues that Timbuktu scholars identified culturally as Arabs. They wrote in Arabic, dressed in Arab styles, and looked to Mecca and Cairo for validation. They viewed local African customs as pagan or lesser. Camp B, the African agency theory, argues that this is nonsense. They point to the manuscripts where scholars proudly list their African lineages. They argue that Timbuktu created a distinct black Islamic identity, Islam Noir, separate from the Arab world. They didn't want to be Arabs. They wanted to be equal to them in the eyes of God. Looking at your friends, chewing African kola nuts while drinking Maghrebi tea, speaking Songhai while writing Arabic, you realize you are a bridge between two worlds. You are the Sahel, the shore. You pour the final round. The third cup is sweet as love. You add even more sugar. It is basically mint syrup now. It signals the end of the meeting. Ahmed wipes his mouth. The tea was good, my friend, but your kola nuts, a bit dry. He grins. He has to get one last jab in. They stand up, adjusting their robes. The caffeine has kicked in. The sun is lower now. The heat is breaking. Back to the ink, Ahmed sighs. I have 20 pages of law to copy before Maghrib. They leave. You are alone again with the dregs of the tea and the pile of cracked nutshells. You feel buzzed. Your heart is beating a little faster. You are ready for the next task. And it is a good thing you have the energy, because the next job involves heavy lifting and a very sharp knife. You need to bind that new astronomy book you bought. And to do that, you need to visit the tanners. You need skin. You leave your guests and the dregs of the sugary tea in the courtyard. The caffeine is humming in your veins, which is good, because the next task requires focus, strength, and a strong stomach. You pick up the loose stack of astronomy pages you purchased from the merchant, the ones you traded the salt block for. Right now, they are just naked paper. They are vulnerable. If you leave them like this, the edges will fray, the dust will settle in the creases, and the termites will treat them like an open buffet. You need to dress them. You need to give them a skin. You wrap your face tight in your tagelmust and head toward the outskirts of the city, toward the Tanner S district. You smell it before you see it. It is a heavy, biological stench. a mix of rotting flesh, bird droppings, and acrid lime. It's the smell of death being transformed into art. In Timbuktu, the tanners, the Gabibi or Wena, are a caste unto themselves. They live on the edge of the city because, frankly, no one wants to live next to that smell. You walk past the large clay pits. Men are standing waist, deep in colored liquids, white lime, red dye, brown sludge. They are stomping on skins. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the myth of Morocco leather. In Europe, the finest bookbindings and luxury shoes are made of Morocco leather. It is famous for being soft, durable, and dyed a brilliant red. But here is the secret. It doesn't come from Morocco. It comes from here. The goats of the Sahel, the Maradi red goats, have a unique skin structure that is dense and fibrous. The skins are tanned in Timbuktu or Kano, shipped across the desert to Morocco, and then sold to Europe. Europeans call it Morocco leather, simply because that's the last place they saw it. But you know the truth. You are holding the genuine article right at the source. You approach a tanner, you ignore the smell of pigeon dung, which is used to soften the hides. The ammonia breaks down the proteins. You are looking for a finished piece. He hands you a skin. It is dyed a deep reddish brown. This color comes from bagaruwa. These are the crushed seeds of the Acacia nilotica. It is a natural vegetable tan that turns the skin into leather and imparts that signature earthy red color. It also makes the leather resistant to mold and, crucially, unappetizing to insects. You pay him with a small pouch of cowrie shells, or maybe a few ounces of grain. You take the rolled skin back to the library now. The real work begins. You are not just a librarian, you are a bookbinder. You sit at your workbench. You place the astronomy manuscript on the table. First, you need pasteboard. You don't have cardboard, so you take scrap paper, old letters, damaged pages that could be saved, and glue them together in layers until they form a stiff board. This will be the skeleton of the cover. Then, you cut the leather. You smear it with a paste made of flour and water, which, ironically, termites love, so you mix in a little poison just to be safe. You wrap the leather around the pasteboard, but you don't make a book like a European book. You are making a wallet binding. This is a niche, distinct feature of Islamic and West African manuscripts. A European book has a front cover and a back cover. Your book has a front, a back, and a flap, pentagonal flap. The leather from the back cover extends out, folds over the front edge of the pages, and tucks under the front cover. Why? Because of the sand. If you leave the edge of the pages exposed, the desert grit will work its way in and sandpaper the text away. The flap seals the book like an envelope. It makes the book a self-contained survival capsule. Now comes the art. Tooling. The leather is damp. You heat up metal stamps in a small brazier. You press the hot metal into the leather. Hiss. The heat burns a dark, permanent impression into the red skin. This is called blind tooling. You create a geometric pattern, a central medallion, intricate borders of interlaced ropework, circles within circles. This leads to a massive academic controversy. The Coptic connection. If you look at the binding style of Timbuktu, the way the pages are stitched, often using a chain stitch, the lack of a rigid spine, and the geometric leather patterns, it looks suspiciously like the ancient Coptic bindings of Egypt and Ethiopia. Campa, the Islamic diffusionists, argues that this style came purely from the Arab world, via Kairouan and Fez. Camp B, the African roots theory, argues that the design language, especially the specific cross of Agadez, motifs, or the leather amulets, gris, worn by the Tuareg, influenced the book covers. They argue that the Timbuktu binding is a hybrid of Islamic structure and Berber African jewelry design. Are you stamping a symbol of Mecca or a symbol of the desert tribes? As you press the tool into the leather, you probably feel it's a bit of both. You are decorating the vessel of God's word with the patterns of the Sahara. You finish the cover. It smells rich, earthy, and leathery, but you don't glue the pages into the spine. This is another unique feature. The manuscript pages are grouped into signatures, loose bundles. They are placed inside the leather case, but they are often not glued to it. Why? Because a scholar might want to borrow just the chapter on Mars, not the whole book. Or, if you are reading in a circle halakha, you can pass individual pages around to students. The book is modular. It is a binder, not a brick. You slide the astronomy manuscript into its new red leather jacket. You fold the flap over. You tie it shut with a leather strap. It feels solid. It feels safe. You have taken a fragile idea from a dead Greek guy, translated by an Arab, copied by an African, and wrapped it in the skin of a Sahelian goat. It is now ready to survive the next 500 years. You rub your thumb over the tooled leather. The friction warms the wax polish. It is a good day's work, but as you admire the cover, you hear voices raised in the courtyard. It's not a legal dispute this time. It's louder, and it's cess coming from the scientists' corner. You sigh. The astronomers and the mathematicians are at it again. In Timbuktu, when the scientists fight, they don't use fists, they use geometry. And they are currently arguing about something that would get them burned at the stake in Europe. But here is just a heated Tuesday afternoon debate. They are arguing about the shape of the Earth. You step out of the binding room, your fingers stained red from the leather dye, and walk into the middle of a geometry war. In the shaded corner of the courtyard, usually reserved for quiet contemplation, two men are shouting at each other. They are drawing furiously in the sand with sticks. A crowd of students has gathered, watching the spectacle like it's a wrestling match. It is a straight line, shouts one scholar, a man named Madabo, pointing his stick at the horizon. Mecca is east. The sun rises in the east. We pray to the east. You are thinking like a beetle crawling on a plate. Retorts the other scholar, Sidi. He is holding a large, round calabash gourd in his hands. The world is not a plate, Madabo. It is a melon, and if you walk straight east on a melon, you will miss the stem. Welcome to the great Chibla debate. You lean against a pillar, crossing your arms. You've seen this before. In Timbuktu, the most dangerous fights aren't tea over gold or women. They are over math. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the sphere of Islam. While popular culture likes to tell us that everyone before Columbus thought the world was flat, the scholars of the Islamic Golden Age, and by extension Timbuktu, knew better. They had known the earth was a sphere since the 9th century. They had calculated its circumference with terrifying accuracy, thanks to Eratosthenes and later Al-Biruni. So, the argument here is ins t flat versus round. It's much more sophisticated. It's Mercator projection versus Great Circle route. Madabo is arguing for a flat earth approximation rum line. He believes that since Timbuktu is roughly on the same latitude as Mecca, it's not, but close enough for his argument. You should just face east. Sidi is arguing for spherical trigonometry. He knows that because the earth is curved, the shortest path between 2 points on a sphere, the Qibla, is not a straight line on a map, but a curve that bows northeast. Give me the melon, you say. Stepping into the circle, Sidi hands you the calabash. You take a piece of charcoal and draw a dot. Timbuktu. You draw another dot on the other side. Mecca. Then you take a piece of string from your pocket. A librarian always has string. You pull it tight between the two dots along the surface of the gourd. The string doesn't go straight across the equator of the gourd. It arcs upward. The string does not lie, Madabo, you say gently. The path curves. The students gasp. It's a simple demonstration, but in the 15th century, visualizing 3D geometry is a superpower. This leads to a niche, fascinating detail. The mathematician, Mosque. Because of these debates, Timbuktu is full of mosques that point in slightly different directions. If you walk through the city, you will notice that the older mosques, built by early traders, point strictly east, but the newer mosques built after the scholars returned from universities in Fez and Cairo with better math, point northeast. The architecture of the city is literally a timeline of mathematical progress. You can tell how smart the architect was just by checking his compass heading. But the debate doesn't end with the melon. Even if it curves, Motabo grumbles, kicking the sand. How do we calculate the angle? We don't have the tables from Baghdad. We make our own tables, Sidi says, puffing out his chest. This brings us to a massive academic controversy, the Timbuktu math capability. For a long time, Western historians dismissed Timbuktu's science as purely religious. They thought these guys were just memorizing the Quran. But recent studies of the manuscripts have revealed books filled with sine and cosine tables. Camp Ah, the skeptics, argues these were just copied blindly from Arab sources. They say Timbuktu scholars were users of math, not creators. Camp B, the innovators, argues that the manuscripts show original work. They found errors in the imported tables that were corrected in the Timbuktu versions. This implies that someone here sat down, did the trigonometry from scratch, found a mistake made by a guy in Cairo 200 years ago, and fixed it. That is high-level peer review. I have the new book, you interrupt, patting the leather-bound volume in your sash. The astronomy text you bound earlier, it has the corrected declination of the sun. Both scholars stop fighting. They look at your sash with hungry eyes. The corrected tables. Sidi whispers, from the Maghreb. Motabo asks, better, you lie. Or maybe it's the truth, verified by the stars of the Sahel. You hand them the book. They descend on it like vultures on a carcass. They flip the pages, tracing the diagrams with dirty fingers. You cringe, thinking of the grease, arguing about the azimuth. You leave them to it. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows across the sand. The heat is breaking. The melon debate was fun, but it highlights a deeper anxiety in the city. Why are they so obsessed with the Qibla? Because they want to be sure their prayers are landing. And why do they need their prayers to land? Because the world feels unstable. The Songhai Empire is at its peak. Yes, the Askia sits on the throne. The gold is flowing. But rumors are drifting down from the north, carried by the same caravans that bring the paper. Rumors of a new sultan in Morocco. A man who needs gold to pay his mercenaries. A man who has purchased fire sticks, muskets from the Christians in Europe. You look at the two scholars, still arguing over the curvature of the earth. They are brilliant minds. They can calculate the position of a starlight years away. But they cannot see the storm gathering just across the desert. You walk back into the library. The dimness feels different now. It feels less like a sanctuary and more like a bunker. You look at the thousands of books stacked on the shelves. Law, astronomy, poetry, medicine. If an army comes, an army that doesn't care about spherical trigonometry. What happens to all this? You remember the stories of Baghdad. When the Mongols came, they threw the books into the Tigris River until the water ran black with ink. The Niger River is just a few miles away. You shake your head. Paranoia, you tell yourself. The desert protects us. No army can cross the Sahara with artillery. It's impossible. But then you hear a sound from the street, not a debate, not a goat. It is the sound of the town crier. The beating of a heavy drum. Doom, doom, doom. News from the north. The crier shouts. The salt caravan has been stopped. Soldiers at the mines. Your blood runs cold. The salt mines of Taudeni are the canary in the coal mine. If the soldiers are there, they are halfway here. You look at the floor of the library. It is dirt. You look at the shovels in the corner. You realize that you might need to stop being a librarian and start being a grave digger. not for people, but for the books. It is time to run a drill. It is time to practice the evacuation protocol. You bolt the heavy cedar door of the library. You slide the wooden crossbeam into place. For the first time today, you aren't trying to let the light in. You are trying to shut the world out. The town crier's strum is silent now, but the vibration still rattles in your chest. Soldiers at the mines. That means the Moroccans. That means the Al-Mansur from the north is hungry for gold. You look at the thousands of manuscripts resting peacefully on the shelves. The astronomy book you just bound. The law texts. The poetry. To a soldier, these aren't treasures. They are kindling. Or worse, they are pagan nonsense, to be confiscated and taken back to Marrakesh as trophies. You put down your pen. You pick up a short-handled hoe daba. It is time for the fire drill, except there is no fire yet, and you aren't running toward the exit. You are digging in. This brings us to a mainstream historical reality, the underground library. When people talk about the lost libraries of Timbuktu, they often assume the books were destroyed. In reality, they were just chilled. For centuries, the scholars of Timbuktu developed a reflex. Whenever the political wind changed, Tuareg raiders, Songhai civil wars, Moroccan invaders, the books went underground. Literally, the floors of Timbuktu's houses are made of packed earth. If you dig down 3 feet, you have a cool, dry, secret basement. Almost every major family library in the city sits on top of a ghost library, buried beneath their feet. You walk to the corner of the room, under a pile of prayer mats. You kick the mats aside. You start to dig. The earth is hard. It's packed clay. You have to hack at it. Thwack. You are sweating. The dust rises, coating your throat. You aren't just digging a hole, you are building a time capsule, but you can just throw the books in the dirt. That's murder. The termites we fought earlier live in the dirt. So, you have to use the chest strategy. You drag over a heavy wooden chest, reinforced with iron straps. You inspect it. It must be airtight. You take a block of beeswax and rub it vigorously over the seams of the wood. You are sealing the cracks. You are making a submarine for books. Now comes the hardest part, the triage. You look at the shelves. You have space for maybe 50 books in this hole. You have 2,000 books on the shelves. Who lives? Who dies? Do you save the Holy Quran? Of course. It's God. Word. But every mosque has a Quran. Is it rare? Do you save the Muqtasar of Khalil? The law is vital. But again, there are copies in Cairo. Do you save the Tariq al-Sudan, the local history, the chronicles of your own city? Yes, if you lose that, you lose your memory. You lose the names of your grandfathers. You grab the local histories first, then the unique scientific commentaries, the ones where Timbuktu scholars corrected the Greeks. You realize you are prioritizing your people's voice over the classics. You wrap each book in a piece of indigo cloth. The dye repels insects. And then, in a layer of leather, you pack them tight into the chest. No air gaps. Air means moisture. Moisture means rot. You lower the chest into the hole. It lands with a heavy thud. This leads to a niche architectural secret. The false wall garbier. Sometimes the floor is safe. If the soldiers burn the house, the heat will bake the books underground. So, you look at the thick mud walls of the library. They are 2 feet thick. You tap a section near the window. It sounds hollow. This is a pre-prepared cache. You use your knife to pry out a section of the dried mud brick. Behind it is a cavity. You slide your most precious, smallest manuscripts, the gold-leafed prayers, the talismans, into the wall itself. Then, you mix up a fresh batch of Banco mud plaster. In a bowl, you slap it over the hole. You smooth it out with your wet hand. Within an hour, the mud will dry. The wall will look seamless. To find the books, The invaders would have to tear the building down brick by brick. But this frantic hiding sparks a massive academic controversy, the Berry versus smuggled debate. Historians looking at the 1591 invasion, which is looming in your future, and the modern 2012 crisis, argue about the best strategy. Campa, the bunkers, says, hide them in the city. It's safer. The desert is dangerous. Moving books exposes them to bandits and the elements. Keep them close, keep them deep. Camp B, the smugglers, says, run. They argue that a city under occupation is a trap. If the scholars leave, the books must leave. They advocate for the book caravans, loading manuscripts onto donkeys and canoes and scattering them into the remote desert villages and river hamlets. The controversy is, did the bunkers actually save more books, or did they just create convenient piles of fuel for the invaders to burn later? In 2012, the librarians did both. They hid some and smuggled others by boat. You, in the 15th century, are torn. If you run, you might die. If you stay, you might be executed. You decide to hedge your bets. The big chest is in the floor. The precious gems are in the wall. But you keep one bag packed, a leather satchel with the essentials, a Quran, a law book, and your astronomy notes. If you have to run into the dunes tonight, you will take the stars with you. You finish smoothing the mud over the floor hole. You pull the prayer mats back over the spot. You stand up, breathing hard. You look around the library. It looks normal. But you know that beneath the surface, it is a minefield of knowledge. You wipe the dirt off your hands, you feel a strange sensation. It's not fear anymore. It's defiance. The Moroccan soldiers have muskets. The fire sticks, that thunder-like storms, you have mud. You have leather, and you have patience. Let them come. Let them conquer the streets. They will never find the heart of the city because the heart is buried 6 feet under their boots. But you can stay in the library all night. It looks suspicious. You need to go home. You need to sleep, or at least pretend to. And to get home, you have to navigate the city in the dark. And in Timbuktu, the dark is not just an absence of light. It is a presence. It is the domain of the jinn. You blow out the candle. You step out into the night air. The sky is ablaze. The stars are out. And for a librarian who just buried his life's work, the sky offers one last comfort. It is the only map that cannot be burned. You look up. You are going to read the night. You step out of the stifling, dusty air of the library and into the courtyard. You look up and you stop breathing. If you live in a modern city, you have never seen the sky. You have seen a muddy orange-gray haze with maybe 5 or 6 bright dots struggling to shine through the streetlights. But here, in the 15th century, on the edge of the Sahara, there is no electricity, there is no smog. The humidity is near zero. The sky is not black. It is a crushed velvet violet, so thick with stars that they cast their own faint, silvery shadow on the sand. The Milky Way, the Darb al-Tabana, the straw merchant's path, is not a smudge. It is a roaring river of light that splits the heavens in two. You clutch your leather-bound astronomy book to your chest. You don't need a candle to read the sky. You just need your eyes. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the Arabic map of the heavens. You look at the bright red star pulsing in the shoulder of the giant Orion. You call it Yad al-Jaza, the hand of the central one. Centuries later, Europeans will mangle your pronunciation into Betelgeuse. You look at the bright star trailing the Pleiades. You call it Aldebaran, the follower today. It is still Aldebaran. You look at the zenith. Altair, the flying eagle. Altair, almost every named star in the modern Western catalog bears the fingerprint of Islamic astronomers. While Europe was stumbling in the dark, scholars in Baghdad, Cairo, and yes, Timbuktu, were naming the lights. You are looking at a legacy that will outlast the paper you write on. You open your book. You hold it up against the horizon. You are checking the Qibla again. The North Star Jah is low on the horizon here. You use the guards of the little bear to orient yourself. You confirm the mosque is aligned correctly. The mathematicians can relax. But the stars aren't just for praying. They are for survival. You look toward the north, toward the endless dunes of the Sahara out there. Right now, hundreds of men and thousands of camels are walking in the dark. The Azalai, the salt caravans, move at night. The day is too hot. It kills the camels, so they sleep in tents during the sun's rage and march under the starlight. The navigator of the caravan, the Madigu, is doing exactly what you are doing. He is reading the sky. If he misreads Al-Judi Polaris by 2 degrees, the caravan misses the oasis. And in the Sahara, missing the oasis does mean you are late. It means you are dead. You feel a connection to him. You are the theorist. He is the practitioner. You write the map. He walks it. This leads to a niche, complex system. The lunar mansions, Manazil al-Qamar. While the Greeks loved the zodiac, 12 stations of the sun, the Arabs and the Africans favored the moon. The moon moves quickly, visiting a different star cluster every night. There are 28 mansions of the moon. You check the moon's position tonight. It is residing in the mansion of Al-Thuraya, the Pleiades. This isn't just trivia. This tells you the season. It tells the farmers when to plant the millet. It tells the nomads when the rains will come to the Sahel. It is a cosmic calendar. You trace the path with your finger. The sky is a giant clock mechanism, and you are one of the few who knows how to tell the time. But as you scan the southern horizon, you think about the people who live in the cliffs to the south. The Dogon. This brings us to a massive, slightly sci-fi academic controversy. The Sirius B mystery, the Dogon people, who live in modern-day Mali, not far from Timbuktu, have a rich mythology involving the star Sirius Sigui Talo. Campa, the Marcel Griol theory, claims that the Dogon knew centuries ago that Sirius had a tiny, heavy, invisible companion star, Sirius B, a white dwarf. They supposedly knew its orbital period, 50 years, and its density. Griol, a French anthropologist, claimed they told him this in the 1930s. If true, it implies they had knowledge that requires a telescope or alien contact. Camp B, the skeptic Carl Sagan, argues this is cultural contamination. They suggest the Dogon learned this from visiting European astronomers or missionaries in the 1920s, incorporated it into their mythology, and then fed it back to Griol. They point out that Timbuktu manuscripts, which are incredibly detailed, mention Sirius, Al-Ra, but never mention a white dwarf companion. You look at Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. It blazes blue-white. Does it have a secret twin? Your book doesn't say. The Dogon elders might know, or maybe it's just a story. In Timbuktu, the line between science and magic is thin. You cast horoscopes. You calculate lucky days for the emperor. The stars are data, but they are also spirits. You close the book. The night is cooling rapidly. The desert drops freezing cold once the sun is gone. You wrap your robe tighter. You look to the north again. The stars are peaceful. They are orderly. They follow the mathematical laws you love, but the horizon beneath them is not peaceful. Somewhere under that North Star, the Moroccan army is marching. They are coming for the gold. They are coming for the salt, and they are bringing something that makes the sword and the spear obsolete. You have heard the rumors from the merchants. Arquebuses, muskets. The Moroccans have hired Spanish mercenaries. They have fire sticks that thunder and kill from a distance. The Songhai army, your protectors, are brave. They have cavalry. They have iron spears. They have coats of mail, but they don't have gunpowder. You feel a pit in your stomach. All your calculations, all your logic, all your spherical trigonometry. Can it stop a bullet? Can a library survive a cannonball? You suddenly feel very small. The architecture of the Sankor Mosque behind you, which felt so massive and permanent this morning, now feels like a fragile mud pie. The stars will look down on the smoking ruins of this city with the same cold indifference they showed to the ruins of Rome and Carthage. We are just dust, you whisper to the constellation of the Scorpion. But then, a stubborn thought occurs to you. Dust can be compacted. Dust can be hidden. Dust can be built into walls. The Moroccans can take the city. They can take the gold. But they cannot take the mind. Not if you hide it well enough. You turn back to your house. You need to sleep. Tomorrow, you won. Be a scholar. You won. Be a judge. Tomorrow, you will be a smuggler. You have to move the rest of the collection. The fire drill was just practice. The real evacuation begins at dawn. You take one last look at the Pleiades, the 7 sisters. In your culture, they are a symbol of agriculture and planting. Plant the seeds. You tell yourself. That is what burying the books is. You aren't digging graves. You are planting seeds. Maybe they won. Grow for 100 years, maybe 1,000. But someday, someone will dig them up. You step into your house and bolt the door. The silence of the mud walls swallows you. You lie down on your mat. You close your eyes. But in the distance, you swear you can hear it. Not thunder, not the wind. The faint, rhythmic marching of boots on sand. You are lying on your mat, staring at the ceiling of your mud brick house. The wooden beams are dark, stained with smoke and age. You know every knot in that wood. You have stared at them for 1,000 nights. But tonight, they look fragile. They look like they could snap. You haven't slept. The rumors from the market have wormed their way into your brain, eating away your peace of mind faster than any termite could eat a book. Muskets, the word tastes metallic in your mouth. You have never seen one, but you have heard the descriptions from the travelers. Pipes of iron, they say. Thunder in a box. Death that you cannot see coming. You sit up. The silence of Timbuktu, usually so comforting, now feels heavy. It feels like the breath held before a scream. This brings us to the looming shadow of 1591, the end of the Golden Age. In the history of West Africa, there is a clear before and after. You are currently living in the final days of the before. The Songhai Empire, the superpower that has protected you, patronized your library, and kept the trade routes safe, is about to walk into a buzzsaw. The Moroccan Sultan, Ahmad al-Mansur, has sent an army across the Sahara. This act alone is insane. Taking an army across the desert is logistical suicide. Half of them should have died of thirst. But they didn't. They are here, and they are led by a man who is the stuff of nightmares. Judar Pasha. This leads to a niche, bizarre historical fact. The Spanish invader, the general coming to destroy your African empire, isn't an African. He isn't even really an Arab. He is a Spaniard. Judar is a eunuch from Granada. He has blue eyes. He leads a corps of renegades, European mercenaries, Spanish musketmen, and Turkish artillery experts. It is a surreal, globalized collision. You, a scholar of the Sahel, are about to be conquered by a blue-eyed Spaniard, working for a Moroccan sultan, using Dutch or English gunpowder. The world has suddenly become very small and very sharp. You stand up and pace the small room. You think about the Songhai army. The Askia has summoned the cavalry, 30,000 men, brave men, men who ride with iron spears and wear quilted armor that can stop an arrow. They are gathering at a place called Tondibi, near the river. You try to do the math. 30,000 Songhai against maybe 4,000 Moroccans. On paper, it looks like a slaughter. The Songhai should win easily, but you are a librarian. You know that numbers lie. You know that one variable can change the entire equation. Gunpowder. This brings us to a massive academic controversy. The technological determinism debate. Why did Songhai fall? Campa, the tech bros, argues it was purely the guns. The arquebus was a disruptive technology that the Songhai could counter. It was a mismatch, like tanks versus cavalry. Camp B, the internal rot theory, argues that the guns were actually terrible. Arquebuses in 1591 were slow, inaccurate, and overheated in the desert sun. They argue that Songhai fell because it was already crumbling from civil wars, succession disputes, and plague. The Moroccans just kicked down a rotten door. You, standing in your room, suspect it. As both, the empire is tired. The Askia is weak, and the loud noises are terrifying. You think about the cows. The rumor is that the Askia plans to drive a massive herd of cattle, thousands of them, ahead of his army. The idea is that the cows will act as a meat shield, absorbing the Moroccan arrows and trampling the enemy line. It, as a classic tactic, it has worked for centuries. But cows are animals. Cows have ears. What happens when 1,000 cows hear the thunder of 4,000 muskets firing at once? You shudder. You can simulate the chaos in your mind. The cows charge the enemy. They will turn around. They will stampede backward, right into the Songhai lines. Your protectors will be trampled by their own shields. It is over, you whisper to the empty room. The realization hits you not as panic, but as a deep, hollow sadness. The Pax Songhai, the peace that allowed Timbuktu to flourish, is ending. Scholars need peace. You need safe roads to import paper. You need wealthy patrons to buy books. You need a sultan who cares more about theology than survival. Judar Pasha doesn't care about theology. He cares about gold. He will loot the city. He will tax the merchants until they break. And when the gold runs out, he will look at the scholars. He will look at you. This leads to a grim historical foreshadowing. The exile of the scholars. You don't know it yet, but the fate of Timbuktu's intelligentsia is sealed. In a few years, the Moroccans will round up the greatest minds of the city, including the legendary Ahmed Baba, and march them in chains across the desert to Marrakesh. Many will die on the way. Those who survive will live under house arrest, their vast libraries confiscated or scattered. You are the last generation of the free thinkers of the Niger Bend. You look at your hands. They are stained with ink. Ink is powerful. It preserves truth. But ink cannot stop a lead bullet. Ink cannot stop a greedy soldier who thinks a gold-leafed manuscript might contain hidden coins. You make a decision. You cannot save the empire. The Askia is doomed. You cannot save the city. The walls are made of mud. They will not stand against cannons. You can only save the soul of the city. The books. You grab your lamp. You aren't going back to sleep. You head back to the library. The fire drill you ran earlier, that was a drill. That was the beginning. You have buried the history books. You have hidden the talismans in the walls, but there are still thousands of texts on the shelves. The poetry, the grammar, the logic. You cannot bury them all. There is enough time. There isn't enough floor space. So, you have to initiate Plan B, the diaspora. You need to distribute the library. You will call your cousins. You will call the students. Take a bag, you will tell them. Fill it with books. Take them to your grandmother's house in the village. Take them to the river caves. Take them anywhere, but here. You are going to shatter the library into 1,000 pieces to save it. You are turning the centralized archive into a decentralized network. You walk through the dark streets. The wind has picked up. It is blowing dust into your eyes. The city feels different tonight. It feels like a ghost town that hasn't realized it. You pass the Sankor Mosque. The wooden Toran spikes look like thorns against the stars. It has stood for centuries. Will it be here tomorrow? Yes. It is made of mud. Mud is humble, mud endures. The Moroccans might strip the gold, but they won. Steal the dirt. But the paper is fragile. You reach the library door, you unlock it. The smell of old books greets you. It usually smells like home. Tonight, it smells like a funeral parlor. You walk to the shelf. You pull down a volume of poetry. It is beautiful. The calligraphy dances. You stroke the cover. I am sorry. You whisper to the book. You are going to have to sleep in the dark for a long time. You hear a distant boom thunder. The sky is clear. It is the sound of Tondabi, the sound of the cows running, the sound of the end. You blow out the lamp. You don't need light anymore. You know exactly where everything is. You work in the dark. You pack, you hide, you pray, and you hope that one day, when the guns are rusted and the soldiers are dust, someone will come back for the words. You stand in the center of the library. It is dawn. The light filtering through the small windows is gray and weak, illuminating dust motes that are dancing in the silence. The shelves are not empty, but they are gap-toothed. The most precious volumes, the gold-leafed astronomy charts, the unique legal commentaries, the histories of your grandfather, are gone. They are deep underground in the iron-strapped chests, or they are currently bouncing in leather satchels on the backs of donkeys, heading for the river villages of the Niger Delta. You look at your hands. They are raw, covered in dust and dried beeswax. You have spent the entire night dismantling your life's work. But strangely, you don't feel defeated. You feel lighter. This brings us to the final historical reality, the Great Silence. For the next 400 years, Timbuktu will fall off the map. The Moroccan occupation will choke the city. The scholars will be exiled. The gold trade will shift to the coast, to the European ships. The city of 100,000 will shrink to a dusty town of 10,000. The world will forget you. European explorers in the 19th century will arrive and say, "Is this it? Where's the gold? It's just mud huts." They will claim Africa has no written history because they cannot see the books. But you know the truth. The history isn't gone, it's just sleeping. This leads to a niche, heroic legacy. The family librarians. You aren't just hiding these books for yourself. You are initiating a blood oath. For centuries, families like the Haidara, the Kadi, and the Suyuti will keep these chests under their beds. They will tell their children, "Do not open this box. Do not sell what is inside. Protect it with your life." And they will. Through famine, through colonial conquest, through poverty, they will not sell the books. They will become the secret guardians of the memory of a continent. You walk to the wall, the false wall you plastered over yesterday. The mud is dry. It looks seamless. Behind that mud are the words of Aristotle, recalculated by a Songhai mathematician. You place your hand on the cool earth. "Sleep well," you whisper. In the distance, the sound of the boom is gone. The battle at Tondabi is over. The dust is settling. The new rulers are coming. But you are done. Your shift is over. You pick up your own small satchel. You aren't running away. You live here. You will face the Moroccans with the quiet dignity of a man who knows he is smarter than the guy holding the gun. You will teach the children in secret. You will make ink in the kitchen. You will keep the chain of transmission, Sanad, alive, link by fragile link. This brings us to the final academic reflection, the 2012 parallel. We cannot talk about you without talking about your descendants. In 2012, Timbuktu was invaded again. This time, by extremists who believed these shrines and manuscripts were idolatrous. They burned some libraries. But history repeated itself. The modern librarians, the great-great-great-grandsons of you, did exactly what you just did. They mobilized the book caravans. They smuggled 300,000 manuscripts out of the occupied city in jeep taxis, vegetable carts, and canoes. They hid them in Bamako. They saved 95% of the collection. Why? Because you taught them how. You wrote the playbook on survival tonight. You step out of the Sankor Mosque for the last time as a free scholar of the empire. The sun is rising over the dunes. It is the same sun that baked the bricks, the same sun that dried the ink, the same sun that killed the termites. The desert stretches out before you, infinite and indifferent. It doesn't care about empires. It doesn't care about muskets. It eventually swallows everything. But ink, carbon is elemental. It lasts. You wrap your tagelmust around your face. You walk into the wind. You are no longer the librarian of the golden age. You are now the keeper of the secret. And the secret is safe. And so, the door is locked. The key is hidden. The city holds its breath. The noise of history, the shouting of soldiers, the scratching of pens, the braying of donkeys is fading away. It is drifting out into the vast empty dunes of the Sahara, where the wind will scrub it clean. You can stop worrying now. You don't have to check for termites tonight. You don't have to watch the horizon for dust clouds. The books are safe in the cool, dark earth, wrapped in their leather blankets, sleeping the deep sleep of the ages. They will wait. They are very good at waiting. Imagine the sand blowing softly against the walls of the library. Shh. It is a gentle sound like a mother hushing a child. The sand is burying the secrets, covering the scars, smoothing over the footprints of the invaders. You are safe in your mud brick room. The walls are thick and protective. The air is cool. The stars, Altair, Aldebar and Sirius, are watching over you through the window, just as they watched over the caravans 1,000 years ago. They are your eternal nightlights. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let the dry desert air relax your chest. The ink is dry. The story is written. There is nothing left to do but rest, drift into the quiet, drift into the safety of the hidden places. Sleep. The story ends here. Good night.